Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here to take some really fascinating source material and we'll pull out the key insights just for you.
That's right.
Today we're getting into something called breaking the code. It's based on some compelling stuff from a source titled 007 Values of Leaders and Churches That Break the Code. And our mission really is to figure out what makes leaders and organizations, truly impactful. We want to look past just the programs and get to the core values that drive real lasting change. We're after those nuggets that genuinely move the needle.
And I think what's exciting here is that this material really helps us understand the why behind effectiveness. It's not just surface level.
Okay, let's jump right in then. The source starts with this really strong idea. Breaking the code is not about programs. It is about values.
That's the foundational piece.
Yeah, and Gary Davis from Church in the Wind puts it perfectly. He says, we don't care if you're wearing a suit or a T-shirt and jeans. What we care about is the condition of the heart. It really is. It's saying that these code-breaking leaders, they just think differently. And that thinking leads to organizations that actually make a difference. The source points to 6 key areas involved here. Spiritual formation, discipleship, reaching the unchurched or unreached, evangelism, culturally relevant church expressions, and interestingly, spiritual warfare.
And what's vital to grasp, I think, is the underlying view of following Jesus. It's not just a set of beliefs.
Right.
It's framed as a way of life that transforms us to be the incarnation of Christ in every culture.
Transforms us.
Yeah, and it makes this important point. Jesus and the church, they aren't inherently modern or postmodern. They kind of transcend that, but they absolutely incarnate into those cultural settings and challenge them. So mission becomes this intrinsically translational task.
Translational.
Like adapting.
Exactly. God relating to people within their culture, Jesus embodying that, like in John 1.14. It's about meeting people right where they are. Okay, so if values are the bedrock, let's dig into that first one, spiritual formation. This is where it gets really interesting. There was this North American Mission Board exercise, 300 mission strategists involved. They found tons of barriers to church growth, right?
Yeah.
But get this, 71%.
Wow.
0.71% boil down to issues of the head and heart.
That's huge. It's not primarily strategy or resources.
Exactly. It's about who the leaders are internally and the culture they create. The source then lays out 6 areas tied to leadership effectiveness and spiritual formation.
Yeah, these 6 are like the internal components. First up is calling.
Okay.
Code breakers don't just wait around for opportunities, they create them. Like that NFL coach Mike Ditka quote the source uses. Leaders find a way or make a way.
Oh, proactive.
Very. Driven by need, not ambition, committed to a specific people or place.
So it's not just doing good work anywhere. It's targeted. Focused.
Precisely. Then there's character. These leaders lead from a high sense of moral authority. Influence comes from integrity, not position.
Words and actions aligning.
Exactly. When people see that consistency, they invest, they trust. Then comes competency.
Right.
They're self-starters, they figure things out, but they also study like crazy. They know each context is unique.
Lots of trial and error, I imagine.
Oh, yeah. Learning from risks, failures, successes, that's what builds confidence.
If that practical grit combined with learning. Makes sense.
It does, and it flows right into comprehension. Competency is hands-on, comprehension is learning from others.
So reading, mentors.
Reading everything, seeking mentors, visiting other leaders globally, doing whatever it takes to learn and prepare for success. A real commitment to understanding.
Sounds intense, like a total dedication to getting it right.
It really is. Which brings us to commitment. The source says, perhaps this is the greatest challenge.
I believe it.
Breaking the code is just plain hard work, requires an incredible amount of commitment. No shortcuts.
And the last one.
Courage. This one, the source notes, is perhaps one of the most underestimated areas.
Really? Courage.
Yeah. A high level of courage for the tough decisions. They're described as being almost rude about vision.
Rude about vision, meaning?
Meaning unwavering, protecting unity, hiring and firing right, making the hard calls needed to break through.
Wow. Those 6 really paint a picture.
Yeah.
Definitely not easy. Okay, let's shift gears to the next value. Discipleship. The source makes this distinction that honestly, it hit me hard. It says, you can attract a crowd and still not have a church. You can build a church and not make or multiply disciples. One of the authors, Ed, shares this really painful story from his church plant. Grew fast, numbers-wise,
Right.
but no real maturity because the discipleship strategy wasn't there. Took a rough second year to fix it.
That's a tough lesson.
Yeah. Then he gives this amazing example. Set Free Church in California, working with urban bikers. Talk about breaking the code.
Oh, Set Free is fascinating. Their discipleship process is really comprehensive, like multiple stages.
How does it work?
It starts with outreach concerts, preaching, food, They invite people to Christ, but also crucially to come to their ranch.
You have a ranch.
Okay, there. They immediately start getting clean, drying out, and doing intense Bible study. Then they move into the church, learn a trade, become part of the community.
So it's really holistic.
Totally. And some even go to a one-year Bible school and get sent out to start new outreaches, new ranches, new churches themselves. Multiplication.
That's incredible. Tailored right for that group. Full life transformation.
Exactly. And the source ties this back to 3 core elements for making disciples. 1, living like Jesus lived. 2, loving like Jesus loved.
Right.
And 3, leaving behind what Jesus left behind. What's interesting is how different the application looks depending on the context, right?
Right. Pikers versus, say, urban professionals.
Totally different approach, but the same core principles.
Makes sense. Let's unpack living like Jesus lived. The source says Jesus called followers into a radically different way of life, not just a club.
Yeah, he gave them power and a picture, modeled it for years.
And this leads to that sharp critique. The world isn't interested in Christianity because we Christians aren't known as people who live what we say.
That stings, but there's truth there.
It then points to Philippians 2, that downward spiral of Jesus.
The kenosis passage.
Right, not grasping equality with God, making himself nothing, servant, humbling himself to death. The source frames this as like a radical blueprint.
It's about letting go of status, comfort to serve, taking risks.
Like those breakthrough pastors mentioned, starting churches at great cost, turning struggling ones around, real self-denial.
Exactly. Then you have loving like Jesus loved. And the key here is it's not just a feeling for people we like.
Right.
It's a commitment toward all people, regardless of their relationship to us. And it's modeled. It gets passed on as they see us demonstrate it in all kinds of environments. Active, consistent.
Love is commitment, not just emotion.
Got it.
And the third, leaving behind what Jesus left behind.
This is about Jesus leaving behind people who could replicate his life and love, reproduce.
The source mentions Neil Cole and CMA, Church Multiplication Associates.
Right. And Cole is really candid in this report they quote. He says, look, we're growing, but it's mostly addition rather than multiplication.
Wow, honest.
Very. He says they've reproduced disciples, churches, but not yet leaders, networks, or movements. His goal, to reproduce CMA itself. That deep commitment to leaving what Jesus left.
That's aiming high, reproducing the capacity for reproduction itself.
Exactly. It's a whole different level than just adding numbers. Building a legacy.
Okay, so from discipleship, let's talk about reaching the unchurched or unreached. David, one of the authors, shares that personal story.
Yeah, growing up non-Christian, his father's transformation.
Right, from alcoholism.
Yeah.
And his dad's ministry saw life change every week. David thought that was normal.
Until he saw other places.
Yeah, where everyone talked about evangelism, few did evangelism. He talked about this huge divide between insiders and outsiders.
And that brings up this tension the source highlights. Churches really focused on the unchurched. They often create a degree of discomfort among some church-reached folks.
You can't please everyone.
Pretty much. The source says you cannot have it both ways. You prioritize one or the other.
And it mentions that irony. People asking for deeper meat.
Right. And it often means minutia, like end times charts, not the transformational truths of living and loving like Christ.
While the code-breaking churches offer that life-transforming stuff, but still have ways for deeper study.
Exactly. It's about focus.
So how do they focus?
Okay.
The source mentions 4 ministry groups.
Right.
Churched reached, churched unreached, etc. And code breakers aim for the unchurched unreached, moving them to maturity.
That's the target.
And for the church folks who want more programs, they need a strategy to help them see less is more.
Right. It requires intentionality.
And they do this by asking 4 key questions.
Yeah, these questions guide their outreach strategy. First, where are the unchurched unreached? Not just general, but specific places. Communities with no church, huge populations, places where the church doesn't speak the language.
Got it. Location matters.
Second, who are the unchurched unreached? Demographics. Is it white singles, urban upscale high-rises, or young couples making 75Ks and 350K houses? The methods have to differ.
Totally. You have to know who you're talking to. Brilliant examples.
Makes it real. Third question, why are they unchurched unreached? This brings in George Hunter's 4 barriers.
Okay, what are those?
First, the image barrier. How people see Christianity. Boring, irrelevant, arrogant, maybe untrue. For some, church feels as alien as walking into a bar at 1 a.m. on a Saturday for an evangelical.
Uh-huh. Good analogy. Okay, image. What else?
Second, the cultural barrier. Hunter calls it the stained glass barrier. Jargon, music, the people, the building itself can feel totally alienating.
So these are things we can potentially change or address, obstacles we put up.
Exactly. Remove those barriers. Then Hunter talks about the gospel barrier. The source says this is the only legitimate barrier. It requires real spiritual change, repentance, a new life.
Okay, that one's fundamental.
Right. And finally, the total commitment barrier. That's the call to really follow through after encountering the gospel.
And the source really stresses doing everything we can to remove all image and cultural barriers, doesn't it? To clear the way.
Absolutely. That's key to the why.
Yeah.
And that leads to the 4th question. What is God already doing among the unchurched, unreached?
So don't just assume nothing's happening.
Right. Discern where God's working, learn from others, and then joining God in his activities. It's collaborative, not starting from zero.
I like that. Joining God. Okay, let's talk evangelism, specifically making it culturally relevant. Reggie McNeil gets mentioned.
Yeah, author of The Present Future. He had this sharp take on why some church plants plateaued.
What was it?
He said it wasn't strategy, it was because they were just reaching everyone like us or everyone who wanted to be like us.
Ouch. Homogenous.
Pretty much. And he's quoted saying, in North America, the invitation to become a Christian has become largely an invitation to convert to the church. They join the church. The reduction of Christianity to club membership can't be said better than that.
Wow. That's a direct hit on reducing faith to membership.
It is, and it signals this big shift in evangelism. Proclamation is still vital, but it needs context. Community, experience, and service.
Very good. Break those down.
Community. The gospel travels best along relational lines. Think New Testament, whole households, neighborhoods getting involved. Relationships are key.
So less formal presentation, more shared life,
Yeah.
organic connection.
Exactly. Second, experience. Inviting people into that community lets them experience Christian life firsthand. Many have no reference point. Discipleship can start way before conversion here.
Seeing is believing, kind of?
Sort of. And third, service. The power of volunteerism. Mountain Lake Church is the example here. Attendance exploded from 400 to nearly 2,000, mostly unchurched people.
How did service do that?
Getting people involved, volunteering in small groups.
Yeah.
It speeds up the process of their spiritual journey. They feel affirmed and accepted. Doing leads to belonging, leads to believing.
That's fascinating. Practical involvement driving spiritual journey. Okay, wrapping up the core values. Culturally relevant expressions of church and spiritual warfare.
Right, cultural relevance first.
Yep.
Harvey Kahn's quote, "People must be able to say, 'God speaks my language.'"
Makes sense.
Churches need to be truly indigenous to their context. Gospel flows best without unnecessary cultural hurdles. This affects message, worship, how discipleship happens, evangelism, everything.
So worship might sound like pop music in one place,
Yeah.
traditional hymns in another.
Yeah,
Both valid if they connect.
exactly. Speaking the community's language. Then, spiritual warfare.
Okay, this one can sound out there.
The source acknowledges that. It says, many books on spiritual warfare are just, well, odd. Mapping strongholds, talking to demons.
Yeah, demon in every doorknob stuff.
Right. Some of it is odd. But the source insists, if we ignore it completely, we will not break the code in our community.
Why? What's the core idea then?
It points to biblical stuff, spirits, demonic resistance, Satan blinding people. But practically, it's about becoming aware of all the factors that hinder the work of God in a community and then to address them head on.
So less spooky, more strategic awareness of hindrances.
Precisely. Ed's examples. Apathy and false religion in Buffalo, consumerism and image in North Georgia. These are real strongholds.
Okay, so what do you do?
You recognize and pray against those specific cultural and spiritual blocks. Pray for God to break down strongholds of disobedience, for the Spirit to work. It's like exegeting a community deep interpretation.
Understanding the history, the unseen forces.
Yeah, studying the terrain before acting, confronting what holds people back.
Okay, so bringing this all together, what's the bottom line? The source says churches breaking the code don't do it by accident.
No, it's intentional.
They're relentless in their love and devotion to Christ, eager to give God glory, and ultimately God has chosen to work through them.
And the big picture takeaway is described as a discipline of seeing your context through missional lenses.
Missional lenses.
And
Right.
then exercising faith by taking the necessary risks to live the Great Commandment in such a way that you can fulfill the Great Commission. Values, seeing clearly, acting courageously.
That's a powerful summary. So as you, our listener, reflect on all this, the character, the courage, the strategies for reaching people, here's a challenge from the source. Identify the values that you need to cultivate if you're going to break the code in your own world, your own context.
Yeah.
Which of these values really challenges you the most? And maybe more importantly, how can you start putting these values into action, maybe even starting today?